You don't belong in this neighborhood. People like you shouldn't be shopping here. That's what a teenage boy hissed at me as he snatched a pack of ribeye steaks straight out of my grocery cart. He couldn't have been older than 16, but his smirk carried the kind of entitlement only a kid raised to believe he owned the world could have. But here's the kicker. The boy's mom, an HOA queen bee named Cheryl Miller, showed up seconds later, and within moments, she was dialing 911, screaming for the cops like I was some dangerous criminal. She wanted an army of officers. What she didn't know is that every single officer in this city already works for me. If you're new here, smash that like button, subscribe for more wild HOA nightmares, and share this with someone who loves seeing karma served ice cold. You won't want to miss what happens when Cheryl finds out who I really am. It was a Thursday evening. I'd only been living in Cedar Hills Estates for about 2 weeks. Fresh start, quiet neighborhood, or so I thought. I had just finished loading my cart at Greenway Market, picking up fresh vegetables, some steaks, and dog food for Duke, my golden retriever. Nothing special, just another grocery run. I blended in on purpose, casual jeans, an old ball cap, a plain gray t-shirt. Nobody would have guessed I was the chief of police, the man running the entire department of over 300 officers. That's how I liked it. No fanfare, just me, the community, and a chance to observe how people treated one another when they didn't know a badge was in the room. The cashier had just started scanning my items when I heard it. The heavy footsteps, that arrogant throat-clearing sound only teenagers make when they want attention. Before I could turn, a pale hand darted past me, yanking my pack of ribeyes right off the conveyor belt. "Hey," I said calmly. "Those are mine." The boy's grin widened, smug. "Nah, someone like you doesn't need this expensive stuff. Stick to the cheap cuts, old man." I'd faced gang members, armed suspects, men who thought nothing of pulling a trigger, but something about that smug kid made my blood boil in a way I didn't expect. Years of training kept my voice even. "Son, hand them back. Now." Instead of complying, he puffed out his chest, clutching the steaks dramatically like I'd threatened to hit him. "Mom, help! This guy's attacking me!" Heads turned. A couple of shoppers froze, unsure what they were watching. That's when I heard it. The rapid clack of designer heels on linoleum. Enter Cheryl Miller. She stormed into view like a hurricane in pearls, her blonde hair perfectly sprayed, her designer purse swinging like a weapon. "Get away from my baby!" she shrieked, shoving her son behind her. Her manicured finger jabbed toward me like I was on trial. "You lay one hand on him and you'll regret it!" Before I could explain, she whipped out her phone. 911? Yes, this is Cheryl Miller. There's a dangerous man threatening us at Greenway Market. He's 6'2", scary, hostile. Send backup. Send the SWAT team if you have to. We need 20 squad cars here now. 20. She actually demanded 20. Other shoppers started pulling out their phones, not to call 911, but to record her. I could already see the headlines, Suburban Karen meltdown in grocery store. I pulled out my own phone and hit record. Calm, steady, documenting everything. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "your son took my groceries. I asked for them back. That's all." Cheryl's face twisted with fury. "Oh, shut it! People like you are always causing trouble in good neighborhoods, always playing the victim card. Well, not here. I run Cedar Hills Estates. I'm on the HOA board, president actually. You'll regret stepping foot in this town." Her words dripped with venom, each syllable sharpened into a weapon. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a bratty kid and his overprotective mom. This was war. I tilted my head slightly, feigning curiosity. Cedar Hills Estates, huh? Her chin lifted proudly. The nicest community in the county. And trust me, you'll never live there. People like you can't afford it. That smug declaration might have landed on someone else. But me, it was the moment the trap snapped shut. Funny you say that, I replied. I moved in 2 weeks ago, Morrison Drive, just across from the clubhouse. The color drained from Cheryl's face so quickly, I thought she might faint right there between the produce and the frozen pizzas. Her son, still clutching the steaks, stared at me like his world had tilted sideways. You're lying, Cheryl stammered. I would know if someone like you moved into my neighborhood. I leaned on the cart, keeping my voice friendly, even casual. Guess we'll be neighbors then. Small world. That smile must have scared her more than anything I could have said, because she grabbed Brandon's arm and dragged him toward the exit, still hissing under her breath. On cue, her son tossed my steaks back onto the belt. One slid off, smacking the floor with a dull thud. I picked it up, brushed it off, and paid for my groceries. But I knew one thing as I walked out that door. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Later that night, as I carried my groceries into my new home on Morrison Drive, I saw her. Cheryl. She pulled into the driveway across the street, her eyes locking on me like she'd seen a ghost. Her grocery bag slipped from her hands, cans rolling across her perfectly trimmed lawn. No! No, no, no! She screamed, loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to hear. I gave her a polite wave. Evening, neighbor. Her jaw clenched. Her face turned crimson. And that was the exact second the war officially began. Because Cheryl Miller didn't just try to humiliate a random shopper at Greenway Market. She had picked a fight with the chief of police. And she had no idea how badly she was about to lose. That first night in Cedar Hills Estates should have been peaceful. I'd unpacked my groceries, grilled one of those ribeyes, and was looking forward to catching up on some paperwork. Instead, I got a front row seat to Cheryl Miller's opening salvo. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the walls of my house shook with the sudden blast of music. Not just loud music, weaponized loud. Speakers in Cheryl's windows boomed with old-school rock, every guitar riff vibrating through my floors. I pulled back the curtain and there she was, standing in her living room, silk robe draped over her frame, holding her phone up like she was broadcasting to the world. "This is what happens!" she shouted into the camera, her voice cutting over the music. "When strangers invade our neighborhood. This is our community. He won't last a week." I grabbed my phone, not to call her out, but to document. Video, audio, timestamps. Every second mattered. I texted my deputy chief a single phrase. Phase 1. She's taking the bait. By 3 a.m., the music cut off. Silence returned for all of 3 minutes. Then, splat. Eggs. One by one, they exploded against my siding, sliding down my front door, yolks dripping into sticky yellow streaks. I stepped into my study, flicked on my security system, and watched as her son, Brandon Miller, stood in my yard, hurling carton after carton of eggs. His aim was sloppy, missing the front door half the time, but the message was clear. He thought vandalism would scare me. I hit record on the camera feed, zooming in, and when Brandon pulled out his phone to film himself doing it, smirking like he just pulled off the crime of the century, I almost laughed. Because what he didn't know was this. His mother wasn't just raising a bully. She was raising my best witness. At 4 a.m., the final act of Cheryl's harassment arrived on 4 legs. Her 3 overfed Labradors came charging into my yard, tearing through my newly planted flower beds, digging holes like they were hunting for gold, and leaving steaming piles right on my porch. From her porch, Cheryl clutched her robe and gave the fakest performance of concern I'd ever seen. "Oh no! How did they get out? Bad dogs, come back!" She didn't move. She didn't whistle. She didn't even try. She just filmed herself, probably for her HOA Facebook group, pretending it was all an accident. But my cameras saw everything. The unlocked gate, her nudging them toward my yard, the smug smile when she thought no one was watching. That's when Cheryl marched across the street, shoulders squared like she owned the block. "You don't belong here," she spat, stopping just short of my property line. "This is a family neighborhood. We have standards." I didn't even glance at her, just adjusted the hose, letting the stream of water arc across my roses. "It is a nice neighborhood," I said evenly, "though I'm not sure egg throwing and dog trespassing fit the standards you're talking about." Her face flushed crimson. "Don't you dare accuse my son! He's a good boy!" "Good boys don't vandalize homes at 3 in the morning," I replied calmly. For a moment, she faltered. Then her eyes flicked up to the small black dome camera mounted by my door. "Ha!" she barked. "You think that cheap little toy will save you? Cameras don't scare me. You'll never prove anything." She stormed back across the street, still muttering. I smiled faintly, because she was right about one thing. If that was my only camera, it wouldn't have saved me. But Cheryl didn't know I had 4 more hidden, recording every angle in crystal clear HD. And Brandon? Well, he was kind enough to make his own evidence too. 2 nights later, Brandon crept across the street with a baseball bat. He smashed that visible camera with 3 sloppy swings, pieces scattering on my driveway. Then, grinning, he pulled out a spray paint can. The words he scrawled across my garage door were so vile, so hateful, that even repeating them makes my stomach churn. But here's the kicker. He filmed himself doing it, uploaded it to a private account with the caption, "Smug, got his camera. Mom's gonna be proud." What neither he nor Cheryl knew was that the destroyed camera was a decoy, a $25 fake. The real ones were hidden inside my porch light, mailbox, and even a decorative rock in my garden. I didn't just have footage of Brandon vandalizing my property. I had footage of Cheryl watching from her porch, directing him like a stage mom at a school play. The next morning, as I hosed off the spray paint, my phone buzzed. It was Linda Parker, my next-door neighbor. "Marcus, she doesn't know who you are, does she?" "No," I said, "and I'd appreciate it if we kept it that way." Then Linda sighed. "She's run 3 families out in the last 2 years. Always the ones who didn't look like her. Please, just be careful." I thanked her, hung up, and pulled up neighborhood records. Sure enough, 3 families gone, each citing hostile environment on their moving papers. A week later, flyers appeared on every doorstep. Cheryl had called it. Of course she had. By the time I walked into the Cedar Hills Community Center, the place was packed. Folding chairs lined with nervous residents, whispers buzzing through the room. Cheryl stood front and center, in a sharp navy suit, her son in the front row looking smug again. Behind her, a projection screen flickered with the title. I slipped into a seat in the back, folding my arms as Cheryl launched into her performance.
Thank you all for coming.
she began, voice trembling with fake sincerity.
We have a dangerous outsider among us. He claims he bought the Morrison house, but has anyone checked his background? Has anyone verified who he really is?
She clicked to the first slide, a grainy photo of me watering my plants.
This man attacked my son at the grocery store. Poor Brandon was terrified. And now he lurks around, watching, plotting. I fear for our children. I fear for our property values.
Several residents shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded along, others stared at their shoes. Brandon chimed in loudly.
Yeah, he looked at me all scary, like he was gonna hit me.
The lie was so blatant I almost laughed. Then Cheryl played edited footage from her own cameras. Me stepping into my driveway, me walking back into my house, cut to look sinister.
You see?
She cried, pointing like I was on trial.
Always lurking, always watching. I make a motion to have him removed from our community. Who's with me?
A dozen hands shot up immediately, some in fear, some in loyalty to her. But before the vote could move forward, I stood. Chairs squeaked as every head turned. Cheryl froze, her smile faltering. Thank you for inviting me, Cheryl. I'd hate to miss a meeting about myself, she stammered.
You don't belong here. You can't speak.
Actually, I said, pulling out the HOA handbook I'd read cover to cover. Your own rules state every resident can attend and speak at open meetings. Fascinating little document. The HOA president, an elderly man who looked exhausted by all of this, cleared his throat. He's right. If Cheryl can present evidence, so can he. I stepped forward, pulled out my phone and connected it to the projector. Let's start, I said, with the full video from Greenway Market. The screen lit up. The room fell silent. There was Brandon, stealing my steaks, his hateful words echoing through the speakers, his fake cries for help. Cheryl's 911 call demanding 20 squad cars and a SWAT team. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers turned to outrage. Cheryl's face drained of color. That's fake. It's AI. Deep fakes. I tapped the screen again. Up came Brandon's spray paint video. His voice, his face, his smug caption. And in the background, Cheryl, watching from her porch, arms folded proudly. Half the room erupted. A woman in the front row turned on Cheryl with fury. You told us he was dangerous. You said he attacked Brandon. And all this time, it was you? The HOA president slammed his gavel. These are serious allegations, Cheryl. If true, the HOA could be liable for harassment, criminal harassment. The room dissolved into chaos, shouting, gasping, people rising to their feet, and in the middle of it, Cheryl's voice shrieked above the noise. You'll regret this. All of you. He's a liar, a fraud. He doesn't belong here. I calmly disconnected my phone and returned to my seat, letting the storm rage. Because what they didn't know, what Cheryl didn't know, was that I hadn't even played my strongest card yet. This was just the beginning. The real reveal? That was still to come.
The days that followed the HOA meeting were unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and I've handled everything from gang wars to hostage standoffs. Cheryl Miller didn't retreat after being exposed in front of her neighbors. No, she doubled down. By sunrise the next morning, she had plastered community Facebook groups with posts about me, spinning wild tales about drugs in my garage, late-night, suspicious activity, and mysterious cars supposedly parked outside my home. Each story was more outlandish than the last, but in neighborhoods like Cedar Hills, fear spreads faster than fact. Screenshots of her rants came pouring into my phone from residents who didn't believe her lies. Linda, my neighbor, sent me one where Cheryl claimed I was casing houses and waiting to rob families when they left for vacation. Another post accused me of running a gang recruitment operation. The comments were a mix of horrified believers and fed-up skeptics. Still, I documented them all. Every post, Every accusation, every timestamp was preserved. What Cheryl didn't know was that her son Brandon had become her biggest liability. The kid couldn't resist showing off online. He had set up what he thought was a secret account where he bragged about scaring the new guy and documented their harassment campaign. His mistake? He left the location tags on. Every video was stamped with his home address, tying each act of vandalism directly back to them. One clip even showed Cheryl in the background telling him to make it look scary. Another caught her promising him cash if he kept at it. Then came the phone call that shifted everything. Cheryl thought she was being clever by using a burner phone, but she stepped onto her porch when she made the call, and my security system recorded every word. She was speaking to a local blogger, a woman named Janet, who ran a small site about community news. Cheryl offered her $2,000 cash to publish an article painting me as a criminal. Janet hesitated, but Cheryl pushed harder, even threatening to remember things differently about Janet's custody battle if she didn't cooperate. What she called friendship was really blackmail. I listened to that recording twice, shaking my head at just how reckless Cheryl had become. The harassment wasn't only digital. One evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I found the words, "Go back where you came from," spray-painted across my car in dripping red letters. A dead rat lay on my doorstep with a note that simply said, "You're next." For the first time since moving into Cedar Hills, I felt a wave of exhaustion heavier than any criminal case I'd handled. Not fear. Never fear. Just the weight of watching someone so consumed by hate dedicate every waking moment to destroying me. That night, I sat in my office staring at an old photo of my late wife. She used to tell me to always take the high road, to rise above ignorance. But sometimes the high road only leads to a cliff, and someone like Cheryl was more than willing to push others off it. I knew I couldn't let this continue. Not just for me, but for the families she had already chased away and the ones she'd target next if left unchecked. A text from my deputy chief pulled me from my thoughts. The city council was pressuring for my suspension, citing concerns raised about my neighborhood conduct. Cheryl had friends in high places, strings she was pulling. "Boss, do we intervene?" the message asked. I thought long and hard. Before replying, "Not yet. Schedule a press conference tomorrow, 3 p.m. City Hall. Mandatory attendance for all department heads." The reply was immediate. "Are you sure? Once you go public, there's no going back." I looked at the stacks of evidence I'd collected, the endless files of screenshots, videos, recordings. I thought of the families who had been run out of this neighborhood by Cheryl's reign of terror. Then I typed back 2 words. "I'm sure." Meanwhile, Cheryl was celebrating what she thought was her victory. She posted in her groups that the police chief had finally listened and would be exposing me at City Hall. She invited her followers to bring signs, promising that the criminal in their neighborhood was about to be ousted. Brandon even uploaded a video of her practicing a speech in the mirror, accusing me of being a dangerous threat. She was so confident, so certain she had won, that it never once crossed her mind why the announcement had used my name. To her, I was still just a stranger to be destroyed. To me, she was about to become the centerpiece of her own undoing. By midnight, I had gathered every file, every recording, every screenshot into one presentation. Years in law enforcement had taught me that timing mattered as much as evidence, and tomorrow, Cheryl's timing would be her downfall. I sat back in my chair, the city skyline glowing outside my window, and felt a calm certainty settle over me. Cheryl had demanded justice, had demanded police intervention, had demanded to face the chief himself. Tomorrow, she was going to get everything she asked for. The question wasn't whether she would break. It was how spectacularly she would fall when she realized the truth, and that truth was coming faster than she could ever imagine. City Hall was packed before I even arrived. By 2:30, the press had already staked out every available inch of the marble steps, Cameras pointed at the podium where the words Police Chief Marcus Hayes gleamed in bold lettering. Inside, the council chamber was standing room only. Reporters checked their microphones, photographers adjusted their lenses, and residents from Cedar Hills filled the front rows with nervous whispers. Cheryl Miller was among them. She had gathered a small entourage of supporters, people she'd whipped into a frenzy with her online posts. They carried signs scrawled with slogans like "Protect our neighborhood" and "Remove the threat." Cheryl herself sat front and center, dressed like she was running for office, her hair sprayed into a helmet, a folder of notes clutched tightly in her manicured hands. She was smiling, practically glowing with anticipation, certain that the show about to unfold would crown her as the savior of Cedar Hills. What she hadn't noticed was that the podium already bore my name. She was too consumed with rehearsing her lines, muttering about property values and safety, to read what was right in front of her. At exactly 3 p.m., I walked through the side entrance. This time I wasn't in jeans and a ball cap. I was in full dress uniform, medals gleaming, badge polished until it shone under the lights. My shoes clicked against the marble floor as the room quieted instantly, all eyes turning toward me. Cheryl's expression froze, her triumphant smile faltering as she processed what she was seeing. She stood abruptly, pointing toward me with a trembling hand. "That's him. That's the man I've been warning everyone about. Arrest him right now before he hurts someone." Reporters swiveled their cameras, murmurs spreading like wildfire through the chamber. Some laughed under their breath. Others simply stared. Cheryl's shriek echoed off the walls. I ignored her entirely, walking past her row without a glance, and stepped up to the podium. Adjusting the microphone, I looked out over the sea of faces and began calmly. "Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I'm here today to address a series of troubling incidents that have occurred recently in Cedar Hills Estates. What you are about to see may be disturbing, but it is important for our community to understand exactly what behavior we will not tolerate in this city." Cheryl shouted over me, her voice cracking. "He's lying! He's impersonating an officer! Someone stop him! This is illegal!" Her protests only drew more camera lenses in her direction. I nodded to my deputy, who dimmed the lights and activated the large screen behind me. The first clip played. Brandon Miller, clear as day, stealing steaks from my cart at Greenway Market, and sneering, "People like you don't belong here." His fake cries for help followed, then Cheryl's frantic 911 call demanding 20 squad cars and the SWAT team. Her voice rang through the speakers, dramatic and hysterical. Gasps rippled. Through the audience, reporters typed furiously. Some residents covered their mouths in shock. Cheryl's face drained of color, but she still tried to shout above the evidence. "That's fake. It's AI. Deepfake technology." The next video played before she could continue. Brandon in my driveway, spray painting slurs across my garage, grinning for his own camera, while Cheryl stood on her porch, arms crossed, nodding approvingly. The footage left no doubt. Her direction was visible, her complicity undeniable. A low rumble of outrage spread through the chamber. A man in a suit muttered as he pushed past reporters toward the exit. "I can't be associated with this," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "My company has diversity initiatives." A woman near the front row turned on Cheryl with fury. "You lied to us. You told us he was dangerous. You never said your son did that." The clips continued. Egg yolks splattering against my siding. Cheryl's Labradors tearing through my garden while she filmed herself pretending to call them back. Brandon smashing what he thought was my only camera. And finally, the audio recording of Cheryl's phone call to Janet, offering $2,000 for a defamatory article and threatening to sabotage her custody case. By the time the lights came back on, the chamber had erupted. Voices overlapped in outrage. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Cheryl stood in the chaos, her face pale, her folder of notes slipping from her trembling hands. "This is entrapment," she screamed, her voice hoarse. "He set me up. He's probably a criminal himself. You're all being fooled." I let the room roar for a moment before raising my hand. The noise quieted. Reaching into my jacket, I pulled out my badge and placed it on the podium with a deliberate thud. The sound echoed through the chamber. "2 weeks ago, you demanded to know who I am," I said, my voice steady, carrying across the room. "You called 911 and insisted 20 police cars respond. You demanded to speak with the chief." I paused, letting the silence build, every eye on me. "Well, here I am. My name is Marcus Hayes, and I am the chief of police for this city. Every officer in those 20 cars reports directly to me." The chamber erupted again, this time in stunned disbelief. Reporters shouted questions, cameras zoomed in, residents gasped aloud. Cheryl staggered backward like she'd been struck, her hand clutching her chest. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into her chair, eyes wide with horror. Her son, Brandon, tried to slip out unnoticed, but tripped over a chair leg and went sprawling in front of half the press corps, their cameras capturing every humiliating second. I waited until order was restored before continuing. This city does not tolerate harassment. It does not tolerate discrimination. And it certainly does not tolerate individuals who believe their position on a homeowners board makes them untouchable. Cheryl Miller has filed false police reports, directed acts of vandalism, engaged in criminal harassment, and attempted to bribe and blackmail members of the press. Today, those actions have consequences. Uniformed officers moved in quietly from the side doors, placing Cheryl under arrest as cameras flashed relentlessly. Her voice rose in panicked shrieks. "You can't do this to me. I'm on the HOA. Board, I run Cedar Hills. You'll all regret this." Her wrists were cuffed, her folder of notes lying forgotten on the marble floor, pages scattered like confetti. Brandon was restrained next, his voice cracking as he protested. "Mom, you said he was nobody. You said we owned this town." One of my officers shook his head at the boy. "Kid, your mom just spent 2 weeks harassing our boss. Nobody owns the chief." The hashtag appeared online before the press conference had even ended. Karen called the chief. Within an hour, it was trending nationwide. Clips of Cheryl fainting, Brandon tripping, and the badge reveal spread across every social platform. By evening, the footage had reached millions. As Cheryl was escorted out of City Hall, her shouts echoing in the hallways, I turned back to the podium. Justice isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about truth. And today, the truth is clear. Cedar Hills deserves better. This city deserves better. And we will not let hate hide behind HOA rules and neighborhood politics ever. Again, the room erupted one final time, not in chaos, but in applause. Reporters surged forward, residents stood to their feet, and Cheryl's supporters slunk quietly out the side doors, their signs tucked under their arms. For the first time since moving to Cedar Hills, I felt the tide turn. Cheryl wasn't just exposed. She was finished. The power she had wielded like a weapon was stripped away in a single afternoon, undone by her own arrogance and the truth she thought she could bury. But as I stepped away from the podium, I knew this wasn't the end. Cheryl's downfall was only beginning. Court cases, probation, civil suits. The storm she had created was about to swallow her whole. The war was over. The cleanup had only just begun. The fallout was immediate. By the time I returned to my office that evening, the video of Cheryl's arrest had already crossed 20 million views. News anchors were replaying the badge reveal on loop. Commentators dissected every word of her. 911 call. Memes flooded the internet, remixing her demands for 20 squad cars into everything from rap beats to dance challenges. The next morning, her employer, a high-end real estate firm that prided itself on integrity and diversity, released a statement. They made it clear they did not tolerate discrimination in any form and announced that Cheryl Miller's employment had been terminated effective immediately. She had gone from self-proclaimed Queen of Cedar Hills to unemployed and disgraced in less than 24 hours. Her legal problems came next. Prosecutors filed multiple charges, filing false police reports, harassment, attempted bribery, and conspiracy to defame. She managed to avoid jail through a plea deal, but not without consequences. 2 years of probation, $50,000 in fines, and 500 hours of community service, all of it centered on sensitivity training and working with organizations she had once mocked. The judge's words still ring in my ears. "You wanted police involvement, Mrs. Miller. Well, now you'll have it for the next 2 years." Brandon's fate was sealed in juvenile court. 90 days in detention, 500 hours of community service, and expulsion from his school. The vandalism, the racist graffiti, the online videos, none of it could be brushed aside as teenage mischief. It became part of his permanent record. I heard him plead with the judge, saying his mother made him do it, but the court wasn't swayed. Responsibility couldn't be shifted forever. The HOA moved quickly to distance themselves. In an emergency session, Cheryl was removed from the board unanimously. Even her closest allies voted her out, some of them furious that her actions had tarnished the reputation of the entire community. The HOA president publicly apologized to me, acknowledging that they had turned a blind eye to years of intimidation and harassment. It was a hollow gesture, but a necessary one. 6 months later, the bank foreclosed on Cheryl's home. The woman who once boasted about protecting property values lost the very thing she worshipped most. The house sold to a black physician and his family. When Linda, my neighbor, told me the news, she couldn't stop laughing. "It's poetic," she said. She wanted to keep people out. Now she has to drive past proof every day that her little kingdom is gone. Her humiliation didn't stop at the courtroom or the foreclosure notice. Online, she became a symbol of her own downfall. Someone even created a parody video game called Karen versus the Chief, where players had to avoid calling the cops on authority figures disguised as normal neighbors. Her fainting clip was remixed into dozens of songs. Her son's trip at the press conference became a TikTok dance trend. Every attempt she made to salvage her reputation, including a failed GoFundMe campaign, only added fuel to the fire. But the part that struck me most came a year later. On a warm spring afternoon, I was walking through a city park when I spotted a group of community service workers in orange vests picking up trash. One of them straightened up, and I recognized him immediately. Brandon. He froze when he saw me, eyes wide with panic, his hands clutching the garbage bag like a lifeline. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, "Chief Hayes." I didn't move at first. I wanted to see who he was now, whether he still carried that smirk of entitlement. But instead, I saw something different. His face was thinner, his eyes heavier, as though the weight of what he'd done finally caught up with him. Tears welled up as he blurted, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I was wrong. I ruined everything." His voice cracked, his shoulders shaking. For once, there was no bravado left in him. I told him the truth. His mother may have raised him a certain way, but he had still made choices. The vandalism, the words, the videos, those were his decisions. He nodded miserably, wiping his face, admitting he hated himself for it. I studied him for a moment, then pulled a business card from my pocket. A local program called Second Chance Youth. They specialized in helping kids with records rebuild their lives. I told him college wasn't impossible, just harder. Jobs weren't impossible, just more challenging. He asked why I would help him after everything he'd done. My answer was simple. Hate had been taught to him, but kindness could be taught too. The choice was his whether he wanted to change. He took the card with shaking hands and whispered, "I won't waste this chance." Months later, Linda told me she'd seen Brandon volunteering at the food bank. He was serving meals, smiling shyly, trying to make amends. His mother, on the other hand, never changed. She blamed me for everything, ranting on obscure websites, clinging to conspiracy theories. But the world had moved on without her. One evening at our annual neighborhood cookout, a little boy tugged at my sleeve. "My mom says you're a hero," he said proudly. I knelt down and told him the truth. I wasn't a hero. Real heroes are the people who change when they realize they're wrong. That takes more courage than anything else. As I looked around the park, families of every color and background laughing together, kids playing without a thought of who belonged where, realized this was the very thing Cheryl had feared. Not chaos, not danger, unity. Proof that her narrow view of the world was already dying. And that's how Cheryl Miller, the woman who once thought her HOA crown made her untouchable, lost everything. Her job, her house, her reputation, her power. All because she couldn't mind her own business. All because she believed hate could rule a neighborhood. In the end, it was hate that destroyed her. And it was the truth that set everyone else free. If this story hit home, if you believe karma has a way of catching up, do me a favor. Like this video, subscribe for more stories, share it with someone who needs a reminder that justice is real, and drop your own HOA nightmare in the comments. You never know. Your story might be next.